Yo, what's up, gang? This is Cash. Welcome back to my channel. Today, I'm going to be talking about how to be a good ally to non-binary people. Let's get it. So, I hope that you watching this video means that you're ready to be a good ally, because non-binary people could definitely use more allies. Not that many people understand what it means to be non-binary. So I have a number of tips for you guys to make things easier on your non-binary friends or anyone who's non-binary that you interact with. So let's get into it. All of these tips can be applied to trans people who do not pass as their actual gender yet. So a trans man who hasn't gone on hormones, or, a trans woman who doesn't quite pass as female all the time. Like, any of these tips can apply to them as well. So for tip number 1, I'm going to be talking in the context of you having a non-binary friend. So I recommend having a respectful conversation with them, asking them what language they're comfortable with, what you want them to do if someone misgenders you in public. I have, talked to my friends, and I've told people like, oh, it's okay to correct other people because I feel uncomfortable when they call me she. So in a conversation, if someone's like, oh yeah, she said, my friend will be like, actually it's they. And they'll be like, oh, okay. Tip number 2, this is a good thing to do in general, but especially when you're with the non-binary person. So introduce yourself, say like, hi, my pronouns are she, her, whatever. That way, when the non-binary person introduces themselves, they won't feel as uncomfortable saying their pronouns. So that's just like a nice thing that you can do to make the person feel less awkward. Tip number 3 is if you misgender someone or use their dead name, correct yourself, quickly apologize, and move on. There are a few things that make me feel more uncomfortable than when someone says, oh yeah, like Cash was talking about her. Oh my god, I'm so sorry. Oh my god, I'm so sorry. I can't believe I did that. It's just so hard for me. Like, I'm so used to calling you she, so like, this is just a big change. I'm sorry. Oh my god. And I'm sitting there like, okay, like, sorry it's hard for you to call me they. Imagine actually being me. I recommend saying like, yeah, her, there, sorry. And then keep going. Like, it is pretty not fun to be misgendered though, especially if you do it to someone a lot. I suggest practicing, especially when they're not there. If you're talking about them, use the correct pronouns. Say like, Cash they, Cash they, Cash they. Whatever you have to do to kind of get used to it, because it is an adjustment, especially if you've known someone a long time and they're using new pronouns or a new name. Just kind of practice. That's totally okay. And most people won't expect you to get it like absolutely right on the first time, but it is very, very nice when someone is clearly making a big effort and not misgendering you or dead naming you all the time. And we really appreciate that. Tip number 4, correct other people when they get their name or pronouns wrong. So if you're in a group setting and someone, used the wrong pronoun, make sure you correct them. It doesn't have to be in front of the whole group, like, Cash is transgender, like, they use they, them pronouns. Like, that's unnecessary. You can, take them aside later and be like, oh, just so you know, Cash uses they, them pronouns. Don't disclose anyone's, like, identity unless you know specifically that person is, like, totally fine with it. It's never good to out anyone, but if you say their pronouns, that's not quite the same thing, and it's just, like, a common courtesy. Tip number 5, if you know that someone is uncomfortable using the restroom in public, if you're meeting them for coffee, try to find some place with a gender-neutral bathroom. They have like apps and maps and all kinds of things saying all of the like gender-neutral restrooms in a city or something. So it's like pretty easy to find a place with gender-neutral restrooms. Going to a public bathroom can be super traumatizing and anxiety-inducing for someone who either doesn't kind of fit the woman or men stereotypical look, or for someone who's non-binary because like they don't feel like they belong in either bathroom. So like even something as simple as peeing becomes this like, oh my god, like I don't fit into society, like what do I do, where do I go? At least for me. And then for someone who's like a non-passing trans person, especially a trans woman, it can be very dangerous for them to either use the men's room or to use the women's room, have the police called on them, you know. It just makes things easier if there's like either a family restroom or an all-gender restroom. The next tip is to try practicing using gender-neutral terms. Now, as a society, we have very, you know, binary ways of thinking. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. If everyone could put in his or her desired whatever, try using different terms. Distinguished guests, or welcome everyone, or use their instead of his or her, things like that. There are plenty of options for replacement, like instead of like congressman, congressperson, you know, that kind of thing, because a lot of times they're not just like problematic for trans people, they're like kind of misogynistic. Like, why is it a fireman and not a firewoman? You know what I mean? Like, there are fire women. If you're a teacher, instead of saying boys and girls, say children, kiddos, little assholes, like, oh, I don't know, whatever you want to use. Don't do that. It's just like a good thing to kind of work into your vocabulary anyway. The next tip is use they, them pronouns for everyone, unless you explicitly know their pronouns, especially if someone looks like they might not be a gender conforming person. It's like good practice just for anyone, because anyone can use different pronouns from the way they present. But if this doesn't seem like a realistic goal for you, maybe just use they pronouns for people who might not like be cisgender. It's good to use they pronouns. Don't ask them about their like identity. It's okay to be like, hi, I'm blah blah blah, my pronouns are whatever. And if they don't tell you theirs back, can I ask your pronouns? You don't have to be super like invasive about it or anything, but just like check in so you're not misgendering them. The next tip is educate your cisgender friends and family on non-binary issues, I guess. It's very tiring as a non-binary person and just a trans person in general to constantly have to like explain yourself and like basically out yourself at all times whenever you meet someone new, because they're either confused or like have inappropriate questions or whatever. So Google is a great resource. If we're comfortable with each other, I don't mind answering questions. Like, I'm a very open person, because as a white non-binary person, I want to use like my small platform to try to educate people to take the burden off of Black or non-binary people of color, because they have so many intersecting identities. You know, white people also expect Black people to like explain how they can be anti-racist to them, instead of just like putting in the work, Googling, reading books, you know. So being Black and non-binary is just so much work. Anyway, if maybe your family member says something and you're like, like maybe we can be a little more inclusive here, maybe you use this word instead of this word. Or like if someone's like, I don't get what non-binary is, like be like, oh, actually, you know, I have some resources for you, just so that when we encounter those people, we don't feel the same like, oh, here's another person that like doesn't believe we exist, or something like that, if that makes sense. Also, to go along with that, be aware of non-binary people with intersecting identities. Non-binary people come in like all forms. You know, there are non-binary people in wheelchairs, there are non-binary people who are Indigenous, Black, Asian, short, tall, deaf, autistic. We come in all forms, just like everyone, you know, and people have intersecting identities amongst those. You don't have to be just one thing. So certain non-binary people like me who are white have like a lot of privilege categorically. So just be aware of that. That's just something to keep in mind. The next tip is, if either you're a parent or you have friends who are parents and you're buying things for their babies, use colors other than like pink and blue. Don't necessarily buy them gendered toys. If you know like your friend's daughter really, really wants this Barbie, like obviously it's okay to buy her the Barbie, but if it's like an infant, you don't necessarily need to buy her the girliest, pinkest toy, because toys like don't have gender. They shouldn't have gender. Don't force a child to play with certain toys just because of their gender, you know, or their sex, really. Start them young. Going off of that, if you're a teacher, don't split up groups like boys and girls. find a different way to categorize, because that often leaves people feeling left out. I think it's important for all teachers to do this regardless of age, but it's probably even more crucial for middle school and high school teachers, because that's kind of when people get more like self-awareness, like, oh, I don't really fit in. So if you force someone to choose, it can be super uncomfortable for them. Try to advocate wherever you work. If they have like online forms or paperwork, make sure that there's like inclusive gender options, like man, woman, and non-binary, and then other, because man and woman includes trans man and trans woman. You don't need a separate category for them. And then you have a non-binary category and then an other. If someone identifies as, you know, a different gender, they can put that too. The next tip is refuse to be a part of an all cisgender anything. Whether you're speaking on a panel, attending a conference, and none of the speakers are, you know, transgender, that's really the only way that inclusion is going to take hold. I'm not saying if there's 2 people, one of them like has to be trans, but if there's like a group of like 5 people and all of them are cis women and the topic is like something about women's experience, that's not all women. You know, trans women can have a very different experience than cisgender women, so there should be someone to talk about it, and that will eventually eliminate some of the like misassumptions or mystery around trans people, because they will be included in more discussions. The last tip is be aware that there's no non-binary look. If someone tells you they're non-binary but they don't look like androgynous, that's okay. You know, there's not everyone is the same, and being non-binary means something different to like pretty much everyone. So it's okay. If someone doesn't look like me, it doesn't mean they're not non-binary. I suggest supporting non-binary folks through Venmo, Cash App. If they're artists, buy their artwork. If they are freelancers, hire them. Being non-binary like can greatly impact your ability to earn income. I know it does for me. Let's redistribute this cisgender wealth. Hire non-binary people, donate to their fundraisers, just support them in any way that you can. Share their posts, listen to their music, what have you. We definitely are just normal people, and we wanted to be treated like that. We want to be given a chance just like everyone else. Some people don't even believe we exist, which makes staying positive and confident kind of hard sometimes, because a lot of people will tell it to our faces. So the more inclusive and, knowledgeable that you can be as a cisgender person, the better. Thank you for listening. I really appreciate it. I'll be back next week with another video. Peace.
I look myself in the mirror, it cannot be any clearer. I'm so southern.